Howdy, hackers, and welcome to another episode of FairLight TV, the second part of the interview with Blackshadow, Christian Lindeberg. There are a few items still to cover, so be prepared for just about an hour of more material where we talk to Christian. So you will hear the advent of FairLight and the advent of the Amiga scene, and also to some extent the advent of the PC scene. So sit back and enjoy the ride while Christian guides us to the early steps of a number of the items you have grown to like and know. And as with last week's episode, Christian's camera isn't the best, and I also had some sort of issue with my my internet line. So the jerky movement of Christian in some aspects, that is partly his fault and partly the fault of my internet connection. I hope you can survive that, because sound is fine and there should be no problem with sound. So just lean back and enjoy. And over to Christian Lindeberg. And then at Easter 1987, you guys went to Kalmar, and I guess that was some sort of internal party there as well. So we're not talking. So we're not going to dive into the party itself, because we don't have any pictures from that. But we do have something which is really very, very qualified. 1987 in April the 14th, on the train that left Kalmar at 13:11 and then ended up in Malmö at 16:58. What happened then?
That's on the train where me and number one decided to leave West Coast Crackers and create FairLight. So that we have more than just a date. We have a time span of a few hours. And this information is, of course, nothing I would ever remember. If I had ever been asked when was FairLight formed, I'd said, yeah, sometime during Easter 87. That's how far I would got it.
But still qualified, rather than in the end of the 80s.
Yeah, but my mother kept a diary of all things, and as a 16-year-old kid being away from the weekend, she kept track of things as mothers do. So she had written down in her diary that exactly the day and the time of the train. So no matter what you see anywhere else on the net, if it says the 16th of April or whatever day, nothing will ever change my mind and tell me that my mother was wrong, because I'm 100% sure she is correct in this issue.
She's the ultimate source.
Yeah, I'm not correct because I don't remember, but she has it written down, and I trust her with 100%.
So that was the train ride, and sort of what was the discussion there?
Yeah.
Did you have a bad experience at the meeting in Kalmar with the guys, or?
Yeah, this was the party. I don't know if it was the first time we met them, but this was when we met the Kalmar guys. We hadn't met them before, and they weren't in West Coast Crackers on the previous meetings. And I think there was some issue. I don't remember the details. And I remember that there was one thing, if I remember correctly, is that a part of us wanted to continue focusing on the 64, and especially the Kalmar guys didn't even own 64s, two of them. They only had Amigas. And I think there was some more like a discussion than argument on which route West Coast Crackers were going to take. And as I said, I don't remember the details, but anyway, we felt like, let's do our own stuff. And that's what happened. As I said, I don't know exactly what happened, but we just decided to move on.
I have talked about with Tony about this as well. So number one that eventually turned to be Strider, and he said that well, you had the supply of originals and you had the quality of cracking them, and if that was sort of the target of what you wanted to do, you had both the resources you needed for the purpose. You didn't need the bulk of the other guys for that. They were just extra weight on the bandwagon.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we had some difference of opinion on what we wanted to do, and me and Tony just wanted to continue with what we did.
Mm.
We didn't want to do Amiga. We didn't want to focus on doing demos. We just wanted to do what we did, continue cracking, because we had that part solved, and we did it well, and it was fun. So
Cool. And so swapping at this time, it's still not modem, right? It's still only post.
it's still only post, almost, because the third member of FairLight was a guy we knew very well, and he joined like just like 2 days after, and we kind of consider him to be, he is almost one of the founders, because we hadn't really done anything with FairLight before he joined. Anyway, it was a very short process, and he lived in Ronneby, and he did both cracking and coding, but we didn't use post to send stuff to him. And there are lots of stories like this going around, how Tony bribed conductors on trains with chocolate boxes to get them to deliver an original game to Gollum in Ronneby. So it wasn't always post, but
So
mainly, yeah.
Junior of Crack Force Omega turned to be Gollum of Fairlight only a few days after. So
Yeah, it could have been the day after. I don't remember the exact details. My mother didn't write that down, so
what? That's a sloppy mother, not keeping track of who you recruited for the group.
yeah.
Yeah, my mom didn't know anything like that, so that's I'm still impressed that your mother keeps her diaries,
Yeah.
and it's
She
even possible to look it up.
yeah, she did write down that me and Tony visited Gollum in Ronneby the 29th October 1987. So he is mentioned in her diaries, just not when he joined.
Cool. And yeah, well, I didn't have any notes on this, but then you had a number of really early members, and that's sort of the first international connection when you recruited Hobbit.
Yeah, that was later. I don't know how much later, because it feels like it was ages, but back then a week was ages.
Yeah.
So it was probably just a few months, or I don't remember. And I think
But it
did
has to be 87.
yeah, it probably was. And I wonder if it wasn't in combination with one of the computer fairs in London.
Okay.
I think it was called E3, that we went to a couple of times, and a lot of other computer geeks went there that we had postal contacts with, especially Tony, because Tony was the one who did most of the trading back then. I mainly just traded with a few people, and then I did cracking and stuff. And I think Alan the Hobbit was someone Tony knew, and that we then met in London. I know I've met him in London, yeah, at one of these E3s. I'm not sure if it was the one he joined or which one it was, but we've met him there anyway, and also later on.
And the Sarge was also quite early into the group, as was Voodoo Kresten in Denmark.
Yeah.
So I mean,
the Danish guy.
looking at Fairlight, I mean, it's interesting to see that Wasp was very Malmö local. The West Coast Cracker was sort of southern Sweden. And then suddenly FairLight was able to build something across the borders as well, which is sort of new. And that's also, I would see that, I would assume that that is sort of a trend also between in other groups, that you could expand beyond like being a very little local community.
Yeah, around the time when FairLight was created, it was the time where things became more, well, perhaps not global, but bigger than just the local place or even just your own country. The interactions between people in Sweden, Denmark, Germany, or Holland, they were something happened there, especially in 1987, when people just suddenly started to have much more contact with each other.
I mean, I still find it quite interesting that people who are like 20 people in an office and they find it difficult to align the views and how that works in a company where everybody sits in the same office doing something which is rather concrete, whereas we could do it easily without breaking sweat over continents via post. Like, what? We didn't have any Slack channels or anything like that. We had post, a fucking envelope. That's absolutely ridiculous.
I don't remember how we did it. I just know that we did.
Yeah.
I mean, you take whatever means are available and do the best of the situation.
Yeah. Play with the cards you have.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we will have something which is also a very renowned event in the scene history, and that is the Danish Gold Party in the end of July 1987. This is where allegedly Bam Bam put a fire to the scout cabin where the event was held, and I think this is also the place where the original rules were written on how to name the files of a crack so that everybody would know what that was. And of course, this is something that an urban legend that current sceners have heard about, and they possibly have seen a picture of it. But yeah, of course, Christian was there, hanging out, taking a few pictures with his camera. So we will have a look at the pictures.
Pretty crappy.
Those were
quality.
the pictures.
Pretty crappy quality, but it's like very old pictures taken with a pretty bad camera and then scanned in for posterity. And well, it's better than nothing. That's how I see it.
It's a lot better than nothing.
Yeah,
I mean, you can't complain, but that the Egypts were writing things on stone and it was rather poor quality. Why wouldn't they make it better? Like, we have it and it's great. It's there.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that. They were really nice pictures.
This couple party, as you said, was Danish Gold who organized it, and it was not actually a party where people came to copy or trade or much of that. It was mainly the people in Europe who considered themselves as the elite. We rode there on a train, FairLight together with Relax, which is the other part of West Coast Crackers, and Triad as well. And on the party was all the big groups from that time, and no one was really there to do much of, well, some coding was made, someone made a demo, someone copied something, but the main reason was to meet up with everyone that you had contact via post normally. Just meet up and chat about everything. And as you said, some standards were decided there on what symbols should be used for trainers, what endings or whatever should be used for different documentations and stuff like that. It was based on that. Kind of started to exist during that meeting because yeah, it was all the people that did all the stuff in Europe, so they got together and talked about stuff, and
Yeah.
this is one of the results.
And the number of participants was grossly over the estimated number of people that everything was sort of dimensioned for.
Yeah,
My understanding was that Danish Gold kind of panicked because there were so many people coming in, and they were only expecting like a handful, and it was a lot more than a handful.
yeah, of course. I mean, the it was mainly two rooms, one room with all the computers and tables and stuff, and one a bit smaller room where people slept and
Mm.
was just next to each other. And in the sleeping part of this place, people were like, you would be happy if you had like a place 1 times 2 meters where you could put something to sleep on, because it was so crowded, even though people didn't sleep much, as it usually is in gatherings like this.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Cool. And if we now sort of move into the 1988 here, and the Amiga years of FairLight, basically. I joined in December 1988. People tend to think I'm an original member, but I'm one of the noobs. I've only been in like 30 plus years, but I'm still the one eating cigarette butts and cleaning up after the other guys because I'm one of the new guys. So so Tony bought an Amiga, and I guess you also had an Amiga. This is, and now we're talking like the second half of 1988. So I was brought in with a little team around me from One Way to basically replace the existing C64 section, because all of you sort of moved Amiga at the time.
Yeah, and actually, the Amiga, I worked on diskette that summer, as I did earlier as well, because I was still in school and stuff. But the Amiga was actually the first computer that I bought with my own earned money.
Yeah.
So the 64 was paid by my father. So the Amiga was the first one that I bought. It's just an anecdote, but still.
So now take us to the second half of 1988, or wherever we are now, around that period, at the advent of the scene on the Amiga. Now we should have modems, right? I mean, most people
Yeah,
in the early days of the Amiga, and also on the C64 at the time, would start sort of experimenting with modems.
yeah. We had a modem back on the 64 as well, the old 300, 300 or 75, 1200 baud modems, which was mainly used to connect via special programs to look on text-based information, much like text TV used to be, but even simpler than that.
Mm.
So there was no consideration whatsoever to trade or upload games or anything. It would just be way, way too slow. So it was, but it was a start anyway. The real business when it comes to modems started with the Amiga, uh, mainly because the Amiga was relatively cheap considering how powerful it was.
Mm.
So it was possible to make good bulletin board system software for the Amiga, which was pretty impossible on the 64. Sure, you can make a very, very simple one on the 64, but it wouldn't be very good for trading on modems. So it wasn't until the Amiga came and people really started setting up BBSs.
Mm. And Tony had his business selling modems as well. I guess I'm not saying this was in '88, but eventually he formed his FairLight Trading, which was they were selling copiers for NES, and but also modems was sort of one of the
Yeah,
key products, and I guess also like memories for the Amiga.
yeah. He sold a lot of the white US Robotics, I think 3600 boards or something, before everyone started to use the courier modems, which
Mm.
were much more expensive.
Mm.
That came later, but yeah, those white US Robotics, they were the standard of everyone had them that used as BBSs back then.
One of the ugliest piece of equipment you could possibly
Yeah,
buy. I mean, they worked fine. I'm not saying anything like that. Functionality wise, and I'm a guy that appreciates functionality over the visuals anytime.
yeah,
But that was even ugly for me. So
yeah.
it has to
At,
be pretty damn ugly.
at least the US Robotics courier modem was pretty cool looking,
Yeah.
especially in comparison to the white one.
Cool. So let's talk a few of the early members of FairLight then. So Björn Exelon was one of the really early members, and I distinctly remember a conversation with you about him where you are sort of annoyed that he's so young and so competent. Like, what? He's so young.
Yeah.
He shouldn't be able to do that.
He, as things almost always were back then, was a guy who came into diskette a lot. So
Yeah.
that's how I met him. And he did things um, that made me feel like he's a better, younger version of me, which reflects what you just said. I mean, he's a brilliant guy. So he really did some amazing things. A lot of his early demos shows things that no one else did, because he had a strange but brilliant mind.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a few years since I met him last time, but he's actually one of the guys I still meet when I can. And
Yeah, he's
yeah,
a
I know
great guy.
he's also one of those who does not like to be directly linked. So please don't post his name. But we who know Björn know that, and we can send the video to him so to ensure that he sees this. Hi Björn, we should have a beer again sometime. What about Celebrandil, Morten?
Yeah, I remember us making fun of him, calling him Svälj en brandbil. But also a great guy who also made some pretty amazing things in his demos.
Yeah.
And he was in the second wave. So he didn't join at the same time as Exelon. It was more like when we were expanding. But a great guy with great coding skills and great, just as I said about Exelon, Celebrandil also had this strange mind which you need to have to be able to come up with these creative ideas. You need to be a bit weird to be able to figure out and invent the new cool stuff. And
Right.
that's for sure both of those two are the inventors.
And Gollum eventually turned to be a math professor, so he's a
Yeah.
math professor, and Celebrandil is also a professor. I'm not sure if he's full or like acting professor. He should possibly be a professor on his own merits by now. But yeah, so Morten did ray tracing really early when that was just a concept I've heard of, and he was doing it. So great. So Celebrandi, was he in Phenomena before he joined, or did he leave to join Phenomena afterwards? I think we picked him from Phenomena, right?
I think we did. I always get confused about which group they came from and left to when it comes to people, like, because Celebrandil jumped around quite a lot, to be honest. He was in a lot of groups, not like Exelon or most of us others. So I always confused him which order Celebrandil, where he came from and to where he went. But could have been phenomenon, as you said.
I'll make a note, and we will have a talk with Morten about this,
Yeah,
and I will try to add that. It might be that we can have an interview with Morten as well. He should be a
yeah,
great guest for this as well. So
yeah, great guy.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. He lives here in Stockholm now. I mean, all originating from the south of Sweden, but him and me now lives in Stockholm. The collaboration with North Star. I mean, if you talk early Amiga days and the epic products that really made an impression, the FairLight North Star Mega Demo 3, that has to be one of those really first wows.
We
And they are from Helsingborg, right?
Helsingborg, exactly.
Atom and the guys are from Helsingborg.
Yeah, and it was just like it was back then. It was guys we knew because of trading or parties, meetings, whatever, that we got along well with, but not. We didn't want to merge, but we didn't want to work together. So that's what. Let's say the demo section, because North Star never did any cracks. They just made demos, and it was the demo part of FairLight which collaborated with North Star and made a couple of mega demos, which is multiple demos on several discs. I don't remember if the first one was more than one disc, and it was a pretty rare thing back then overall to have a mega demo, a disc with multiple demos in not using the Amiga OS file system, instead using your own system and loaders, and have the demos continuing after each other. So it wasn't any menu or anything, it just was a bunch of demos which continued until they were done.
And I think you did like 3 parts in that one, so you were also a great contributor to the demo. The FairLight cracking on the Amiga at this point in time, I don't see much of that. Was there any real cracking on the Amiga for FairLight in the very early days?
I remember a couple of releases that I did. Bubble was one of them. I'm 100% sure of them. That was Amiga, and this is like the early days of the Amiga, when the game developers didn't use any different special things either, so they used the normal Amiga OS. So you saw there was no bootloader or anything. It just, you saw the blue screen with the white border and some text, and then it started a program on the disk which was Bubble, which then had some kind of copy protection. So I did some cracking early on the Amiga, but mainly as a fun thing, because the fun, as a side gig more or less, because the fun thing with the Amiga was to code on it, writing demos and stuff like that, because the Amiga was so much more advanced than the 64. So just doing the actual demos and intros, that was the fun part. Doing the cracking was more on a side gig, just to do it and to prove to myself early on that I could do cracking on that CPU as well on the 64. So it was more for fun. It wasn't as serious as the cracking on the 64 was. Like the last crack I ever did on the 64 was Flying Shark, and that game is my best release on the 64, and took me a long time because the game was in so many files and it still filled up the memory, so it had very little memory to work with, and it had levels that loaded after each other. and I managed to make a system that had the main file and then like 6 level files, and everything was compressed. And when I was supposed to load a new level file, I moved things around in the 64 memory to be able to load the compressed file into the memory. Then I had to remove the compressed file as I decompressed it because it was in space, and then move everything around back to where the game worked again. So it was a very piece of serious business to do that
Now we
correct.
do when you load a level, you have a level cruncher, and that decompresses on the fly. When you load, it decrunches at the same time, so
Yeah.
you don't have the issue of storing the packed and depacked at the same time. You never have that issue. It's
It,
crunched on the disk, but it emerges on the right
yeah,
spot in the
you
memory
probably
afterwards.
have offsets in the file as well. So one file can load into several different positions.
No, but then you just add segments. So you have like a segment in the file, and then you just join a next segment, because in
Yeah,
the decompressor knows that I'm done, I fetched all the data, and then you
yeah.
can check did you also receive an end of file, and if you didn't, then just fire away,
Continue
it'll
into the
just load again.
next
So
offset. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. Cool. We should mention Cactus and Mahoney. What is the story? Were they members or were they not? That's one of the eternal questions.
Uh, I don't know. I'm not sure. They, let's say, they were considered as members, but they always worked by themselves.
Yeah,
The only guy who ever did things with them was Exelon,
yeah,
if I remember correctly.
yeah.
But they were never involved in anything else that Fairlight did. They were completely their own unit. And I think Fairlight considered them as members, but I'm not sure if they considered themselves as members or just Cactus and Mahoney.
I think
uh,
that's a really fair summary.
yeah,
Cool. There is. We did mention modems, and I guess we should mention that your participation in the group was also running the Seventh Heaven Euro headquarter for Fairlight at the time. So you were also the sysop for not the primary PBS, but sort of the secondary one, I guess.
yeah. And this was when I still lived at home at my parents' place. I had an Amiga. Uh, with which was dedicated with I think 60 megabyte hard drive, one of these 5.25 inch large ones, which I ran. I think it was Army Express. It was called a BBS software back then.
Yeah.
Um, and it was fun. It was great fun, and it was the main BBS for us for a while before Psych took over later on.
Mm.
Uh, and I just mainly had it as a side project because it was fun, it was interesting, but I didn't really care about it, and I didn't really do any trading on the BBSs that much. I just
Mm.
had it because it
Mm.
was fun.
Yeah, and the users did the trading. You didn't need to. You just sort of enabled it happening, and others did the stuff on it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
So okay, there is also one sort of internal joke here. So the Silence, they were the guys that formed the Digital Illusion, and the first game they released was Pinball Dreams. It's an absolutely massively great game. It's still one of my favorite Amiga games, and it says that you cracked it, but you really didn't you? Could you elaborate a
Mm,
bit over that?
yeah, I had actually pretty much stopped doing anything else but running the BBS at that time. I didn't do demos. I didn't crack. I'm pretty much, except for the BBS part, I didn't do anything else for Fairlight. I'd moved on from that part. And then the game was released, and I was asked because uh, of some reasons, if I wanted to put my name on it, and the guy, those who cracked it, or who the one who cracked it, didn't want to have his name on the crack, because it felt too sensitive for them and didn't want to be involved. I don't know if they knew each other or whatever. So they asked if they could put my name on it, and I said, yeah, sure, I don't care. I mean, I don't use it for this anymore, so I don't think people would care, unlike if it was someone more known who had if someone, our, let's say our main cracker back then, would have had his name on this, it might have been complications. And actually, I know what I'm talking about, uh, because I actually did this back on the 64. I cracked a game that I got before it was released to the stores, and I didn't know who made it, and I didn't care. I got it from I think it was HK Electronics
Can I
office.
guess?
Office in Lund. Yeah.
Can I guess? This has to be Vikings, right?
Yeah. The name on the game of the creator was someone I didn't know who it was, and it's Søren Granbeck.
Yeah, then it was Vikings. So that is Sodan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Had I known it was Sodan, whom I met a few times actually, he was on a Danish Gold cover party and stuff. So had I known that Søren Granbeck was Sodan, I wouldn't have released it, especially not an advanced copy like a few weeks before it even hit the stores. But for me, it was just a new game to be released that I got early because of my contacts. So I cracked it, released it, and then one day I got a call from Sodan, who said like, "What the fuck?" and truly, had I known, because he was a friend of mine. But we didn't use our real name or real names. I mean, he didn't know that I was Christian.
No.
He knew that I was Blackshadow. So I had no way of connecting the dots. It would have been much easier with the second game, because that was named Sword of Sodan. So that would be easier to figure it out.
For sure.
In this time, yeah. So I know exactly the thing around Pinball Dreams, how upset people could be, and I don't think he's still upset with me, but not at all.
No.
But it was a thing back then, and it was a jackass move from me to release the game. But as in my defense, I had no clue it was him.
Right, but I would say it's still quite different, because I mean, you didn't know, and if you had known, you probably could have waited 2 weeks or whatever, and it could still be a very early release. So whereas in Pinball Dreams and Gaston cracked it. Let's not kind of try to conceal that, because so Gaston cracked it, and he was really good friend with the guys, and so he pinned it on you, and I wasn't even aware that you were asked. I just thought he just pinned it on you, like let's have Christian there. It makes sense.
As I remember it,
it's good of him to ask.
I think I was asked, not by him, but someone, I think might even been someone in between, might even be someone like Strider asking me, is it okay if we use your name for a crack? And I had no idea what Pinball Dreams was anyway, so I just nod and smile and whatever. I didn't know the implications back then.
It was a game that had effect on me as well, because I was a reviewer of games on Dator magazine, the leading Swedish computer magazine at the time, and so I reviewed this, and I got a copy like a week after it was released by FairLight. but people got it wrong and still assumed that I was the supplier for the game, which I really was not. I was not, and I was in the freezer on the newspaper on the paper for a period of time. They needed to have like a cooling off period where they didn't give me anything because which is unfair, but well, it could have been that I sort of leaked a few of the others earlier, but just
Yeah.
not this one. So I got blamed I got beaten for something I didn't do, but
Yeah.
I probably deserved it at some point. So who cares? So Christian, I think this is sort of wrapping up where we are and all the things I would like to talk to you about, but talking to you here, and we have met a number of times. I mean,
Yeah, of course.
and all of that.
A lot of times.
But what really comes across that you are absolutely not sort of driven by the competitive side of things. It's the fun and the challenge and doing something interesting. You talk very little about competing, beating the other guys, and yes, I did it, they didn't, haha, fuck them.
If anything, I didn't care about being the first with a release back then. Strider cared much more about that than I did. I cared about making a better release than anyone else did. Was smaller, had something else, fewer files, whatever. That was more what I was interested in. I've always been more of a problem solver than a competitor. So that was my driving goal, learning new things, trying to invent ways of doing it better, like the Flying Shark release I talked about earlier, which is in my best release. In my mind, I don't care if someone else thinks that, well, you did this release which was 1 month before anyone else released it. That doesn't matter to me, because technically that was my best release, and that's what matters.
So and you were never involved in the PC side of things, right? And so after the Amiga years, you sort of faded out. You were still sort of around, and your spirit was around, but you didn't really act or contribute in any way, right?
That's wrong, because I did quite a lot on the PC. Just that not many know it, because they only consider games, and I only cracked like 1 or 2 games on the PC for the fun of it, just to test myself out. And the PC had even better tools than the Amiga had. Everyone who has been hacking on the PC pretty early loves something called Soft Ice, which is a real-time debugger. It's amazing. And what I did, and also released on the PC, but it was mainly on the BBSs at that time, was a lot of normal software. So my main thing on the PC was cracking things that required some registration codes and stuff like that, almost like the old manual protections on the 64, where you had to look in a manual, then enter the code. Those kinds of protections were pretty common on the PC, actually, because it was a pretty simple way for them to make a protection without having to make a big deal. And there was a lot of software libraries online, not online, but on BBSs on the PC, which you then took contact with the creator, and you got the code which you entered, and then you got the full version. And that kind of stuff, that's what I mainly cracked on the PC. I don't know
this was
how
not
much it
not
was.
for FairLight. It was not tagged as FairLight or Black
It
Shadow, or
was.
it
It
was.
was released by Black Shadow of FairLight to a rather small community, and it was the thing is, I only cracked what I wanted, which means I didn't, because on the PC, which was so much bigger at that time than the Amiga, and there was so much more. Anyone could develop tools, programs, small things to the PC in ways that didn't never happen on the Amiga. So there were so much things. So I didn't crack anything because it looked like something fun to crack. I cracked it because either I wanted to use it or someone I knew wanted to use it. Then I cracked it. So it was never organized cracking like it was on the Amiga and the 64 and trying to release not even good releases. This was just cracking and it works here. Then my friend can use the software. That was the thought behind the process.
Christian, this is actually kind of a beautiful full circle, because when we started talking about CL cracking and you having something and you wanted to give it to your friend, but you wanted to keep the original, so you had to crack it to kind of pass it on. That's sort of where you were back then.
Yeah.
So a full circle cracking, so you could share it with a close friend, and that's that.
Yeah.
So, but what were you? You are not actively contributing at this point, and what will you say? When did you kind of stop your scene activity?
Must have been the scene activity. Probably, I don't know when I shut down my server, not server, BBS, but it was late 90s. I had my BBS for a very long time. Even after it wasn't Euro HQ anymore, Psych took that over pretty early. But I still had it running for a very long time because it was fun.
Now with the slightly bigger hard disk.
Yeah, and it ran on a PC, not an Amiga. And I actually think I had a downtime when I stopped using it on the Amiga and then started it up again on the PC and used the PC version called PC Express, which was a continuation of Ami Express. Or perhaps it was the other way around. I don't know. I didn't develop
No. I think it was Ami Express from the beginning. I think PC Express was sort of a fork for it, and
yeah, perhaps. Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know.
I mean, it looked the same. So, and you provided the same sort of ANSI graphics for it. So, I mean, from a user perspective, I guess you really couldn't see which one you were using. It's that was the decision of the SysUp where you can get the cheapest hardware, basically.
Yeah, but I know since I don't remember, I use reference points, and when I moved into this flat apartment in late 90s, I think 97, I'm not 100% sure, but something like that, I had a special thing installed in my wall over there, which with 4 telejacks in it. So I had 4 lines drawn into my place. One for myself, 2 for the BBS. But since I've used this guy so much, the guy from Televerket back then, he said, I might as well just put a 4th one here because you'll probably want another line soon enough. So I know I ran the BBS here, and I remember it standing exactly to the left of me. So I had it as late as late 90s. I'm not sure I still had it in the early 2000s, but that was when I completely left, because that was when I still had the name FairLight on anything. After that, I've still cracked PC stuff now and then. Was a couple of years ago, but it still happens, especially if I have, let's say I have a picture in a strange format, I want to convert that one to JPEG or whatever. Then I download a program, and I'm not going to pay for it just to use it once.
Yeah.
I know I'm never gonna. It's a weird file I got from some colleague somewhere. I'm just gonna run this once. All other software that I continually use, I pay and buy for that, of course. But a one-time thing, then I just crack the software, convert the image. Then I usually just delete the software because I have no need for it, and I never spread the software. It can often as well just be a memory hack. So I just hack in the code while it's running, and I don't even modify the file because I'm only going to run it once anyway.
Mm.
But it's still the spirit is some kind still up here. It's just not in the
Yeah.
scene anymore.
Paying $10, no way, but I can spend 10 hours doing it.
Yeah,
Yes.
because it's more fun. And it's actually just that it's fun to still try to
Oh.
keep up. And I would never try to crack something complicated, but I bet because I have better things to do with my time today. But small utility thingies
But
I
you
want
don't
to use
have
one
the
time.
itch. I mean, the
No,
itch
I
of
don't.
going back, cracking stuff on the
No.
64 just for the sake of it. Can I still do it or
Yeah.
no?
No, almost never. I sometimes when talking to you or the not Ivanhoe, King Arthur,
No.
uh, or someone else, I sometimes get an itch, and I of course have my 64 library on my computer, and I have 64 emulators and things, and sometimes I think perhaps I should just
Mm.
start up something machine code monitor and see if I just can ink D020 whatever just just to play around. But I never got that far. The
Oh,
itch
okay.
is just very, very, very small.
So there is no way I can sit here and say you don't have what it takes anymore, right? That wouldn't push it for you. I don't think you're
No,
triggered by that. I would
no,
that sort of thing triggers me. So that, but I don't think it works for you. So
no,
yeah,
it doesn't trigger me.
cool, Christian. Thank you so much. My wife has been knocking on the door 5 times already because food is
Yeah,
ready.
it
So
became a it became a long session,
yeah,
but it's
yeah.
easily like that.
It is. It was like Luigi when I did it with him. It was over 2 hours there as well. So the recording here is just under 2 hours, and out of that, when we clip away the little thing, I think we're up to 90 minutes at least. So
Yeah.
Christian, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I hope I will be able to kind of hang out with you again in the near future without the camera being on all the time. And yeah, you know that we bought our summer house down in Skåne, so
Yeah.
welcome to Bonarp sometime during the summer. So
Yeah, and it was like 2 years ago, last that Christmas, I think, last time we met,
yeah,
and we try to meet up sometimes for beer when you're down. So hopefully we can do that soon again.
we will for sure look forward to that. Thank you so much, Christian, and all the best.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye bye. That was everything we had for this week. Christian Lindeberg, alias Black Shadow of FairLight, previously also known as CL Cracking Company and Saturn of Wasp, and a number of the other things he called himself throughout his career. Thank you so much for the time, Christian. It was great, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in person in the near future. And thank you for watching. If you're one of those watching this, I hope you enjoyed it. And if you just saw this episode, do look at the previous one as well to ensure that you also have the sort of the pretext to this, because yeah, the initial part is also really interesting to hear Christian talk about. Thank you so much, and looking forward to meeting you next week on FairLight TV. Bye bye.